Welcome to Repros Fight Back, a podcast where we explore all things reproductive health, rights, and justice. I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and I'll be helping you stay informed around issues like birth control, abortion, sex education, and LGBTQ issues, and much, much more. Giving you the tools you need to take action and fight back. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, Repros. How's everyone doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So y'all, first I'm recording this on Friday before this comes out. So just things may change from what I'm saying in the intro, but I'm not going to be able to update it. So just FYI. But there is just so much going on. This week has been just utter chaos between the Miffy ruling coming out of Texas, between the Fifth Circuit's ruling, which was still really terrible, to now the Biden administration is appealing to the Supreme Court. And I mean, you should know at least what happened with that by the time you're listening to this. So hopefully, fingers crossed for good news. There's just so much going on, and we can talk about all of that, and I'm sure we'll talk about all of those decisions in a future episode. But the other thing I really wanted to make sure that we took a moment to consider is that Florida passed a 6-week abortion ban this week as well. It is not in effect yet, so, it's not in effect yet. But if it were to go into effect, that would be it. That would be the end of abortion access in the South, right? Like if you look at a map, I mean, from Texas all the way to Florida, all those southern states would have an abortion ban. And that is just horrifying in terms of thinking about people and how far they have to travel in order to access care. That is just another devastating blow to abortion access. Again, the fight doesn't stop here. I do have a lot of hope that we are going to win. Again, my heart breaks for all of the people who are being harmed in the meantime. And we have to keep fighting. And there are so many amazing reproductive justice groups doing such good work on the ground, making sure that people are able to get the care they need with abortion funds, making sure to fund people, to help people travel, to groups that are working to make sure that people are able to get abortion pills they need so they can self-manage. I mean, people getting access to telemedicine. Like, there are just so many ways that people are working to ensure that people who need abortions are able to get them. It's just another huge blow that we did not need. And as always, the fight continues. This is a great time, as always, one, because it is fundathon time, but also it's always a great time if you are able to donate to your local abortion fund or donate to an abortion fund in the South right now would be really amazing. People who really need help accessing what should be really basic health care. Yeah, so I think those are really where my head is at right now, is thinking about these two huge things with the court cases around Miffy and the loss of abortion access in the South. Again, like I said, the Florida ban is not in effect yet. It just would be really devastating if it were to go into effect. I think with that, we'll turn to this week's interview. And I think it's worth giving a bit of a trigger warning for this week. We are talking about people who have wanted pregnancies and are miscarrying and trying to access abortion care in states where abortion is banned. So if you don't want to listen to any of that, and there are some kind of traumatic stories that are shared, please feel free to step away, come back at a time when it's better. Or if you are not able to listen, that's okay too. Just it's worth noting. To have this conversation, I am very, very excited to have with me Amy Littlefield, and I totally forgot to have her introduce herself in the podcast, so let me do a really quick introduction. Amy Littlefield, her pronouns are she, her, and she is the abortion access correspondent at The Nation, and she is a journalist who focuses on reproductive health reproductive rights and religion. And I had such a wonderful time talking to Amy that I hope you all enjoy our conversation, even though it is, like I said, a pretty heavy conversation. So with that, let's turn to my interview with Amy. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Jenny. It's great to be talking with you again.
There's just to be crystal clear, there is so much happening this week.
Everything.
And we're not even going to touch on a lot of those things, but just there's a lot happening around medication abortion right now.
A lot.
And it feels like worth just at least putting a flag in that we know.
It's been one of those years that's somehow been packed into a week. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm super excited to have you on to talk about Catholic hospitals and abortion, but also it's much more than that because Catholic hospitals are kind of all hospitals in states where abortion is banned right now. Spoiler, as we'll get there.
Yeah.
But maybe let's start at the beginning. And I think this is something we talked about the last time you were on the podcast, but I think it's something that unless you're really involved in repro, I think a lot of people don't understand that if you go to a Catholic hospital, there's different care that you are going to get around abortion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like some of these restrictions that existed before the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade are getting overshadowed because everyone's focused on abortion bans, which is understandable. Abortion bans are terrifying and harmful and causing distress and chaos all the time. But yeah, it was really interesting, Jenny, to go back to our 2019 conversation where we were talking about Catholic hospitals and how we were talking about how Catholic hospitals were a preview of the future that the Trump administration and anti-abortion strategists wanted to see. And now here we are in 2023, and we're living that reality, right? And we're living a reality where Catholic hospitals and existing religious restrictions on abortion are coexisting with abortion bans and are also still a major factor in states where abortion is easier to access than ever before, like Washington State, which has a very high number of Catholic hospitals. So just to recap and do my little Catholic hospital elevator speech, Catholic hospitals, which make up around about 1 in 6 acute care beds in the country, follow ethical and religious directives that are written by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. They forbid abortion. They do not promote or condone contraceptive practices, except counseling married couples on natural family planning. They ban direct sterilization of either men or women. And of course, that has been used to deny care to transgender patients in Catholic hospitals who, for example, need a hysterectomy as part of their gender transition. I think we talked on the podcast before about Evan Minton, a trans man who needed a hysterectomy, was turned away from a Catholic hospital because they didn't think his need for a hysterectomy was urgent enough, even though they perform hysterectomies on cis women for other reasons that they do think are urgent enough. So that was the landscape. And of course, Catholic hospitals turn up here in my community in Massachusetts. They exist all over the country. They're not confined to states where abortion is restricted at all whatsoever. And while I was reporting at Rewire, hi, kitty, you sweet kitty. Which kitty is that?
This is Cinder, who feels like she needed to come say hi to everybody.
Hi, Cinder. I see why you call her Cinder, because she is beautifully gray colored. So it's really eerie to go back to some of the reporting that I did in the pre-Dobbs era on Catholic hospitals, because the stories that we're hearing coming out now with frightening regularity about people being turned away from hospitals after their water breaks prior to viability, about people being forced to get sick and be almost at death's door before a hospital feels comfortable terminating their pregnancy. Those were the types of stories that I was hearing and reporting on in Catholic hospitals. And now they're happening everywhere in banned states. And So it's this constant feeling of deja vu that these stories have left the Catholic hospital. They're now happening everywhere. Now, huge qualifier here, which is a lot of hospitals that weren't Catholic also refused to perform abortions prior to the Dobbs decision. So some of these horror stories were happening in Protestant hospitals, in secular facilities, public hospitals in the South. Um, so, people who were pregnant were being forced through this gauntlet of having to wait or having to sicken until the point of almost death in order to have their pregnancy terminated, not just in Catholic hospitals, even before the Dobbs decision made it the case across the board in a lot of states.
I think one of the things, and we'll definitely talk about abortion more as we go forward, but that I think a lot of people don't think about is that it's not just abortion that is restricted, right? It's different forms of contraception. And you may not know that's why you're being refused. I'm sure you have heard some iteration of a friend telling you a story of, oh, I had a friend come to me who was giving birth and wanted to have her tubes tied at the same time because she was having a C-section, and they told her she didn't qualify for that. And I'm like, I'm just going to stop you right there. Was it a Catholic hospital? And they were like, yes, but they didn't the story obviously went on much further because they had no idea that was the reason they were being denied.
Absolutely. And it's a huge problem when the Catholic hospital is the only health system in your community. If they're not going to offer contraception, if they're not going to offer sterilization, if they're not going to offer gender affirming care procedures, where can you go? And I think that's another way in which Catholic health systems offer us a preview of the end game here, which is that we know the religious right is coming for birth control. They've been doing that for a long time. We know that their vision is one of, a complementary role between heterosexual men and women, and a world in which birth control and abortion do not exist or are not allowed, and trans people don't exist, right? And so I think this is another way that Catholic healthcare, where these hospitals operate directly under these religious rules written by bishops, offer us a glimpse into the future that religious conservatives want. And it's kind of scary that I said that to you 4 years ago, and now here we are with, a dozen plus states that have banned abortion outright.
I think the only other thing I would flag with Catholic hospitals is you may not know with hospital mergers that your hospital is actually now a Catholic hospital. They're not all going to be St. Mary's or whatever, where it's clear, with hospital mergers, it could have been taken over by a Catholic health system and kept its name.
Absolutely. Common Spirit, Peace Health. These are names of, huge mega systems that don't necessarily sound Catholic. You're not necessarily going to walk in the door and see a cross on the wall. Or you might end up with a scenario like here. My sister delivered at St. Elizabeth, which is a hospital in Boston. It's owned by a big for-profit system. And so you can end up with these confusing relationships where do they follow the Catholic ethical and religious directives? Yep. Do they not? Did the contract when the sale happened require them to maintain some of these restrictions? Did the land use agreement, when that hospital changed hands, require them to stay Catholic when it comes to reproductive health control, even health control? Freudian slip, but it kind of works.
Yeah.
Are there restrictions that are there even though the hospital has changed hands? It's very confusing and opaque, often deliberately so. And so that makes it really confusing for patients, especially in this landscape where now we have abortion bans and court battles, over reproductive health care being waged on top of that baseline. And so, know your healthcare provider, ask informed questions, check the Catholic Healthcare Association website, be aware. And the other thing is, after we spoke, Jenny, last time about Catholic hospitals, I was involved with a report that the Columbia Law, Rights, and Religion Project did. And we set out to look at Protestant hospitals, Seventh-day Adventist hospitals, Baptist hospitals, hospitals that had a religious affiliation that wasn't Catholic. And we looked in particular in the South, where Catholic hospitals maybe weren't as prominent and where we thought Protestant health systems might be really important. And we found two things. One is that religious denominations often are still playing a huge role in the governance and leadership of these Protestant health systems. And the other is that even though we set out to study religious health systems and what restrictions on reproductive health care might be there, we found hugely pervasive restrictions, especially on abortion care in secular and public facilities all throughout the South, all throughout the Midwest, places that we weren't even trying to study. We had doctors coming to us with stories, horror stories about patients, who had cancer, having their abortion care delayed because the facility, didn't think that that was serious enough, and having their cancer treatment potentially interfered with, because of that. Stories like the ones that are emerging now about the impact of abortion bans that were happening beyond Catholic hospitals as well, because of pervasive abortion stigma, because of laws in some cases regarding public hospitals, and this sort of interlocking network of restrictions, explicit and not, that had such a chilling effect on miscarriage management and abortion care all throughout the country. And so that was the baseline of sort of confusing and dangerous, that was the baseline of abortion restrictions and stigma throughout healthcare and stigma for trans folks in this country before we had the Dobbs decision.
Yeah, one, that was a great report. I definitely checked it out when it came out. And then two, yeah, this was all pre-Roe. So what are we looking at now for abortion? I mean, just for access for needed healthcare, right? In states where abortion is banned.
Yeah. I mean, it's so scary, Jenny. I just want to acknowledge, it's really scary and sad. And these stories, so stories that I reported on, I reported on a woman who was sent away 3 times from a Catholic hospital in Washington state and almost died. She got really sick. Her uterus got infected. She described the pain as the movie The Exorcist, where she was arching off the bed in pain when her doctor, did a pelvic exam. She winds up delivering her fetus in a toilet before she can get to the operating room, because she's had to wait for the Catholic Hospital Ethics Board to approve her abortion to save her life. She had to get sick enough. You've heard that story before, right? You have to be sick enough. You have to be dead enough. A similar story I reported on, a doctor named Jessica Ralph in Wisconsin who had to watch her patient get sick and watch her get a fever and then didn't have mifepristone available in that Catholic hospital to help facilitate her miscarriage management. And these were the pre-Dobbs stories, right? And now what's so disturbing after Dobbs, after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and allowed states to ban abortion outright, is that these stories are everywhere. They're happening all the time. And maybe you saw the report in the Washington Post about the 2 friends in Florida who had rupture of membranes. Their water broke before their fetuses were viable, right? And they're sent home and told to wait and told there's nothing we can do for you under the state's laws. One of those women ended up delivering a fetus into the toilet in a hair salon bathroom and then losing a lot of blood, getting so sick that she almost died. Her husband was praying that she wasn't going to die. I mean, these horrible stories. The lawsuit out of Texas that the Center for Reproductive Rights filed is another sort of collection of these horror stories. This is a group of 5 women who were pregnant in Texas with wanted pregnancies and went through varying degrees of state sanction torture in an effort to terminate pregnancies when that needed to happen. The lead plaintiff on the case is a woman named Amanda Zarowski. And I just want to talk about her story a little bit. So Amanda lives in Austin. She had a wanted pregnancy. She'd named the baby Willow. She was so excited to be pregnant after a year and a half of fertility treatments. And then at 17 weeks, 6 days, she gets diagnosed with an incompetent cervix, common pregnancy complication. And she asks if there's anything that can be done. The doctors say no. Sadly, there's not. She's sent home and her water breaks. And she goes to the emergency room. She's diagnosed with preterm premature rupture of membranes, PPROM. And her amniotic fluid's gone. The pregnancy's not going to survive, but she's told that under the Texas abortion ban, there's nothing else they can do for her. So she has to go home and wait either for her wanted baby to die or for herself to go get so sick that she's considered sick enough, deserving enough of medical care in the state of Texas. And she described really powerfully the hell that this put her in, of having to wait for her pregnancy to end, the pregnancy that she wanted, or for herself to get super sick. And so what happened is she got extremely sick. She spiked at a temperature of 101 degrees. She stopped responding when her husband was trying to ask her questions. This is all detailed in the Center for Reproductive Rights lawsuit. And by the time she's admitted to the hospital, her temperature is 102. It peaks at 103.2 degrees. And at that point, the hospital thought, okay, she's sick enough. She's almost dead enough for us to deliver her without violating the Texas abortion ban. But her saga was not over because she was so sick. And the thing is, in these cases, you can get so sick so fast that she winds up in the intensive care unit. Her family flies into Austin from across the country because they are afraid that she's going to die and they're ready to say goodbye to her. She's in her mid-30s. So, and she's still dealing with this. She survives. She's discharged, but she's still got scar tissue and
just think of the trauma.
Yeah. And this is one story. And it's like, Jenny, I'm telling you this because as a journalist, I know the power that these stories have. I'm like, here, let me show you the evidence. Let me tell you how dead this woman was. Let me tell you what the state of Texas did to her. And then on some level, I'm like, we should not have to tell these stories again and again, right? Like these women should not have to stand up at a press conference and relive the most horrific moment of their lives again and again and again. And that's what's happening all the time. It feels like it's happening all the time these days that these stories are coming out. And the last thing I just want to say about Amanda Zarowski's story, and I noticed this recently when I was looking at the Center for Reproductive Rights website, it happened in a Catholic hospital. And so it happened in a facility where they've got Texas's many layers of abortion bans, including the pre-Roe ban, the 6-week bounty hunter ban, and the trigger ban, all swirling around in Texas and being in effect or not in effect at various points in time. And then they've also got the Catholic ethical and religious directives that tell them you can't terminate a pregnancy unless the woman's almost dead anyway. So what happens in these situations is often medical providers and hospital lawyers are way more conservative than the letter of the law might allow. And so even if there's an exception, which there generally is, that says, yes, you can intervene and do an abortion at the last moment when the woman's about to die, when the pregnant person is about to die, it doesn't always happen the way that, lawmakers imagine it's going to happen.
There are just like so many thoughts pinging around in my head right now. The why must we continually dig up and share our trauma to be seen as full people? Yeah. For abortion, for intimate partner violence, for sexual assault, for all of this. Why do we keep having to have really strong people come out and continually bear their pain to be seen as like full people. So that was like one bucket of things that was like going through my head.
Yeah.
And then the other was thinking all of this, like, is the pregnant person almost dead enough to get abortion, is happening at the same time as a huge maternal health crisis in this country. The US has like the worst maternal mortality rate of developed countries. And this is all happening together. And that worst among developed countries was before before Dobbs. So like, what are we going to see now? And that's scary in so many ways, that it was already terrible and it's probably going to get worse.
Right. Right. It's so hard, and just the amount of bravery and dignity that these women have to stand up and share these stories, and at this press conference, they got up one after another, shared these, my fetus didn't have a brain and my state denied me, the care that I needed. I mean, it's so harrowing. And again, like as a journalist, I feel like I want to tell you these stories. I want to tell you like this is how high the fever was. This is how almost dead she was. And and I sometimes wonder about that pattern, right? Because what are we saying? Like that there's only one deserving abortion patient and she's almost dead? This sort of like archetype of the almost dead person who deserves an abortion. That's the paradigm in a lot of these healthcare facilities right now, either because of religious rules or because of the law or both. But like, I want to try not to follow it, I want to try to avoid it. And I think there's also the powerful storytelling that's happening from groups like We Testify, of people who've had abortions and are happy about it, of people who had abortions for the simple and equally justifiable reason that they didn't want to be pregnant in that moment. And so I think we have to remember the history of this archetype too, which is that this comes from the 19th century. It comes from a moment when doctors were professionalizing, were trying to assert their control over the medical system and drive lay healers out of the picture and ban abortion as part of that process. And the exceptions for abortion bans were for the almost dead. And who got to make that determination? The doctors did. And so that's the legacy of this sort of idea that, abortion is not okay unless you're sick or almost dead. The language in some of these exceptions in the abortion bans are just, impairment of a major bodily function, just the precision with which lawmakers and hospital officials are routinely considering how profound the suffering of the pregnant person must be before an abortion is justified. It's really heavy.
Well, and then when does almost dead become somebody dies?
Yeah.
And like, are we going to hear their story with all of the things happening? And like, will it change anything? Right? Like there were in Ireland that led to a huge revolution and change, but like, I don't know if the same thing would happen here.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's being generous. I doubt the same thing would happen here.
Right.
Right away.
And that's where, I wrote this piece for The Nation about what it's like writing repeatedly about almost dead women and waiting for someone to die, which I think is how I often feel covering this beat in this moment. I was listening to Amanda Zarowski tell her story and driving, and I was this sick, heavy feeling of like, I've heard this story before. I've reported this story before, even before Dobbs. And these brave people who have gone through these experiences keep coming forward and telling these stories and telling these stories. And like, the journalism profession relies on the presumption that You tell the story enough times, it's going to make a difference. But we're living in such an undemocratic reality in some of these states, and with the Supreme Court being in charge of making decisions when it comes to abortion, that, it's hard to see a path forward sometimes. And so, right, like the story you're referring to in Ireland, Savita Halappanavar, who had a very similar experience to the one we've just been talking about. She goes to the hospital. She is told that under Ireland's Eighth Amendment, the fetus she's carrying is protected because it has a heartbeat. Her water's broken at 17 weeks. She developed sepsis. And whereas Amanda Zarowski, ended up in the ICU and almost died, but was able to, be brought back and survived, Savita did not. And she became a cause. Thousands of people rallied in the streets. They, held up her portrait. They said never again. And 6 years later, they repealed the Eighth Amendment in a referendum. So it's clear that under the right conditions, one death can be enough to change a country. And I sometimes feel like I'm waiting for our dead woman. I'm waiting for our death or for our dead trans or non-binary person. And I started to imagine her or him or them and what they're doing right now. Statistically, given what we know about people who have abortions, they're probably a parent, someone who will be missed by a child. So, and the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for trans lives show us that deaths can be political rallying cries and can build movements. And yet, if the person who dies is not, a person whose society is interested in putting on a pedestal, if they're Black or brown or poor, then that death might not be enough to shake the foundations of our, racist, misogynist system.
Yeah, it just makes me think that, they need to be like the perfect victim, right? Like, I know long term, I have lots of hope for where we're gonna get. I just, it's the getting there and what is going to be the spark. I don't know. Maybe I'm just feeling this has been a rough week. So
it's been
this
a rough
is not
week.
the week to ask that question. But yeah,
I think about Rosie Jimenez, right? The first known person to die from the Hyde Amendment, from the ban on federal funding of abortion. She had her, Medicaid coverage of abortion was no longer an option for her. She went to an unsafe provider in 1977, and she died in McAllen, Texas. And, I recently read a book by a journalist named Ellen Frankfort, co-authored with Frances Kissling, about Rosie and the amount of work it took to prove that she had died tangibly because of the Hyde Amendment. And, like we're talking about here, right? The journalist chronicled her last moments. She turned a dark greenish brown color. Blood came out of her eyes. I mean, it's here's the evidence. Here's how bad it was. Here's what your policy did. And yet there was a hesitation to rally around Rosie Jimenez, right? She was Latina. She lived in a border town. She was not, right, what you said, the perfect victim. She was a mom. She was complicated. So that was a case where, we know her story. Reproductive justice activists continue to tell her story, but the Hyde Amendment is still here. It's been renewed every year. So, okay, that's the dark part. But I don't, I'm not someone who wants us to wallow in despair at all, because I think that's an excuse for inaction. So if you...
No, there are definitely, what can we do to change this?
Yeah.
I agree. I try to I can't sit and think about the specific people or things too much because that way leads to despair for me, and I need to keep fighting and keep moving. So one of the things that keeps me going is like, what can we do? What needs to happen to change this?
Yes, I love that. And I'll say, like, I'll tell you my step one, like my practice of finding hope, because I think it's mandatory, is looking at the beautiful and brave ways that reproductive justice activists are finding to show up for each other all the time. You know, the abortion pill circulation networks in this country, formal and informal, the way that friends are helping each other through moments of crisis. The fact that right now, when the future of mifepristone medication abortion is in question, we are seeing people seeking out advanced provision so that they can have those pills on hand for themselves or someone else so that they can be ready. The fact that abortion funds are organizing airlifts and moving mountains and that organizations are like Just the Pill are have mobile vans out there ready to receive traveling abortion patients. That stuff gives me hope because I see people taking care of each other and helping each other survive through these really difficult odds. And I also think, like, the popularity of abortion rights, the recent results we've seen with the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election, ballot referendum after ballot referendum, where the abortion rights side has prevailed, show us that there's a deepening divide between policies like the ones that are preventing people from getting abortions on the ground, whether they're almost dead or they just need an abortion, right? And public opinion. And I I don't know that I necessarily believe in the courts, but I do believe in social movements. And I know that the social movement, um, I do believe in social movements, and I know that the movement for abortion rights is stronger and more robust and more diverse and angrier than I've ever seen it. And that gives me hope. So, if we look back to the case in Ireland, it wasn't just Savita's death that changed Ireland, right? It was
Right.
a social movement involving lawyers, people who knew the law, doctors, people who knew medicine, like all levels, grassroots activists, like people were ready. And I see the groundwork being laid for that now. I really do.
Yeah, it is amazing the ways that groups are working together, people are working together to bring this change about, to make sure that people are always going to be able to access abortion. So even if the Miffy ban stays in place, making sure that people know, okay, so that isn't going to work. Okay, there is this miso only method. It is WHO approved. Here are the pathways to go to get that, and we will make sure it's available. Like, abortion should be in our hands, and the groups that are really fighting to make sure that that stays true. And it's great to see. And yeah, it's definitely the things that give me hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Amy, as always, it was lovely to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. It's always great to talk with you.
Okay, y'all, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Amy. Like I said, it was really heavy, and um, it's just, again, there is a lot. I do have hope, but thinking of all of these pregnant people who are having to almost die to access the care that they need is just really traumatizing. And yeah, it's not good. So with that, let's do the usual. So if you have questions or a topic you would like us to cover, always feel free to reach out. You can email me at jenny@reprosfightback.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. We're at Repros Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, and Repros FB on Instagram. And with that, I will see y'all in 2 weeks. For more information, including show notes from this episode and previous episodes, please visit us at our website at reprosfightback.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Repros Fight Back and on Instagram at ReprosFB. If you like our show, please help others find it by sharing it with your friends, and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.